Chris Philp, you've been pretty much in lockstep with the government over increasing defence spending. In fact, I think, want to go a bit further. But what would you do to pay for it? People are talking now about slashing spending on disability benefits. Would that be part of your agenda?
Well, we had a plan in government to get defence spending up to 2.5% of GDP, which involved things like shrinking the size of the civil service, which had grown enormously after COVID. Unfortunately, the government cancelled that plan when they got elected and have now frantically had to put back in place a plan to get defence spending up to 2.5. So that was unfortunately 8 months that were wasted thanks to a bad decision which this government made. But we do think we need to go further and get up to 3% of GDP because global events make pretty clear, don't they, that we live in a dangerous
continent how
now.
would you do it, is the question I'm really asking. Because when you said before, you referred to your plans. I think you were going to cut 70,000 civil service. The Institute for Government, amongst others, said that's pretty unrealistic. You're not going to be able to do it. So how would you raise defence spending to 3%? Where did you get the money from?
Yeah, well, first of all, on that civil service plan, I think it was 66,000 and it was being implemented. It was realistic, and going back to pre-COVID levels is not sort of going back to the Ice Age. It's just winding the clock back a few years, so I don't accept at all that it's unrealistic. But there are other places to look as well, and I think that does include the welfare budget, because we are spending, as a country, £140 billion a year. It's a huge amount of money on benefits, including disability benefits, but others as well, for working-age people who, frankly, could be working more. There are 9.3 or 9.4 million working-age adults who could be working, who are, in fact, not in the workforce. And getting them back into work is a critical part of saving money.
Indeed, Pat McFadden, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, said exactly the same thing to me. But which bit of the budget would you be cutting? Disability benefits, pensions. What would be your target?
Yeah.
What are you advising the government to do?
Well, I mean, in government, we had a plan, I think it was in our manifesto, that would have realised savings of £12 billion a year from the welfare budget. That would have included things like toughening up the so-called work capability assessments to make sure that only people who are really genuinely unwell are able to claim disability benefits. It's gone sort of far too wide. People are now being able to get signed off because they've got, anxiety, and are then not having to even look for a job.
People are anxious.
Well, sometimes they are, but I think it's gone far too far, and it's costing us billions and billions of pounds a year, and we need to make the system, frankly, a little bit tougher. Benefits have actually gone up, quite significantly. The actual level of benefits have gone up quite significantly. I'm sure that is something the government ought to be looking at as well. But there are like I said, £140 billion a year that are being spent on working-age benefits, people that should be working, and that figure is, frankly, far too high. And I say that not just because of defence spending, but to spend taxpayers' money. Every single one of those £140 billion is paid for by someone getting up early, going to work, working hard, paying their taxes, and I think the number is just too high.
Is there a danger here of a rather cruel race between you and the government to see who can be more cruel to disabled people?
No, I don't think that's right. Obviously, people who are, genuinely disabled and, seriously, genuinely unable to work, obviously should be looked after. I don't think there's anyone in British politics who would say
But you can't
otherwise.
have it both ways.
Well, but look, the number of people who have fallen into these categories is sort of far too high. The thresholds, I think, are too low. It's quite, too easy to get signed off, and we are spending too much money. And we've got to keep in mind, every single pound of that, 140 billion, is being paid for by someone who is getting up early, working hard, and paying their taxes.
All right, look, a lot of this happened on your watch, and I wonder if, looking back now, the Russian invasions of Ukraine in 2014 and 2022 happened under Conservative administrations. There's a long-term decline in defence spending, of course, but shouldn't those two moments have been a red flag that you needed to increase defence spending then, and you guys just dropped the ball?
Well, I mean, defence spending in pound terms, was at a record high, and we did have the plan to increase defence spending further to 2.5%. But look, it is clear that we live in a world
that was after 14 years in government.
Yeah, well, as I say, defence spending...
And after two invasions.
Look, I mean, defence spending in pound terms, was at a record level. We've got and we're maintaining 2 aircraft carriers No other European country has that. We've gotten a renewing
Yeah,
tried
aircraft carriers
deterrent.
without aircraft. My point is that
Well, they've got aircraft.
as a percentage of GDP, you allowed it to drop. You assumed that the Americans would always protect us, and you just missed what was happening.
Well, I think across the Western world, defence budgets have been going down since the end of the Cold War as a proportion of GDP. Actually, our defence budget, as a share of our GDP, is one of the higher in NATO. I think it's in the top 5. It's certainly in the top half of the league table. But look, well, it was before as well. And Western countries as a whole have seen defence budgets go down after the Cold War. But it is, for obvious reasons, but it is clear now that with the way Russia is behaving and, you know, other hostile states like Iran, North Korea are behaving, you know, possibly even China in the South China Sea. It is clear we do live in a more dangerous
my
world.
point is Trump has said the Americans have paid essentially for our welfare spending. But actually, Biden and Obama said exactly the same things, and you didn't listen.
Well, I don't think that's true because, as I say, we did get our defence spending over. The NATO target, Trevor, is, you know, the NATO target is 2%. We've been consistently above that 2% and had a plan to get to 2.5%. But it's clear we do now need to go further.
All right, let's talk about how